talk a little bit about your grandma or whoever. I don't remember her real name. Theodora, or something. Guess what, guys, or gang? We are going to try to talk. We have a lot of room in here. We have made space. This is pretty great. I kind of want to talk a little bit about something that I'm actually working on that has a lot to do with the actual timeline. And that's the economics of VAS. Just VAS alone. Because, you gotta start somewhere, and it's easier to start with the continent you really know, and then you branch out from there. We have, on VAS, we have one, well, that's technically not VAS. We won't include them. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nations. And they kind of generally, like, I actually have, this is those guys. So they're kind of like, let's pretend like that. Oh no, there's 6. Here is the Hefel. Shit, what was the name of those guys? Na 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 na. Your grandma didn't know because she didn't care. I'm just trying to remember names here because I'm seriously forgetting. Well, technically there is Murph. Albadan. And Farso. Okay, so there's actually more than I realized. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 actual nations. Let me see where I should stand. I could zoom in a little bit. Okay. 7 major nations inside of the actual, I don't know, I always want to call it a continent, but it might be more like an island. I don't know. But the land of Vas, we have 7 nations sharing this place. Now, the division is pretty simple here. The Hefel's mountain range divides these 3 to these 2. Oh, you know what? You know who we forgot? The Valen people. The Vilandi. So that's 7. 8. So we have that right there, interestingly enough. Now there are factions within I think it's Lyrians who really are the ones who or the harbingers, or whatever you want to call it, to the Serpentine, and getting into the nitty-gritty of the actual economics is going to be tough because it's just beginning. It's nothing I really ventured into conceptually at all. So, what we'll need to do is establish, I think, river systems. I already drew in blue. Fuck! But we need to understand how the river systems work and what these major nations supply to themselves. Now, the weird thing about it is, like, Alvadan, for instance, is kind of an isolated nation. Now, there was a point in history where they closed their borders, kind of like a magic ward, if you will, much the same as like what the Murphos has. So, a lot of trade with Albadan is hard to think about, I mean, as I understand it. But we do know that Adrana trades with just about everybody. because over here there's Elandria, the nation of Elandria. And Adrana actually has a small island that they own, which I don't remember the name of, that they do a lot of trading in, and this is where a lot of the slave trades happen. So Adrana themselves is trading with most nations on here, which, if I remember, 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 nations. So Adrana is already trading with 4 nations here. They have issues with the Murph, but they do have trade that goes on through there. They do trade with Hefel. And through the Hefel, they trade with Lyria. And through Lyria, they trade with outside of, like, you know, over here on Sapernia, where the Etrovians are and stuff like that. And then Dubois over here. So Adrana themselves is a natural trade hub. And that's actually what a Aval really is. And Aval was kind of created around this. So looking at how Adrana works, I can see very big similarities between how they are. And, you know, I guess you could look at it in history and stuff like that. But how I imagine it is, for the people of the video, when you play like Total War or Civilization or, you know, any other game kind of like that, some sort of city building game, it's kind of how you are. So for me, if Adrana is my country, well, I generally do the same thing every time. I pick a corner of the map, somewhere easy to defend, somewhere out of the way. You know, Great Britain's perfect. You're off on an island and stuff like that, so people leave the fuck alone for the most of the time at least, or anywhere else. I'm not a fan of being in the mainland of anything. I mean, Adrana kind of is, but that's just because this was made before. I would not have chosen this land if I was Adrana, but this is exactly where they chose it. But I do know that when I play the games like that, I find myself kind of an isolationist. I ally myself with just about everybody I possibly can. Everybody. Even if they do not like me, I will ally myself with them. I pay them enough money, they'll like me. So the goal of Adrana is much the same. Treaty deals with everybody. Alliances with as many people as humanly possible. And trading with everyone that's ever fucking walked the world. So Adrana is trading with everyone. Everyone. And the thing is, the more nations you have on your side, the more chances of something happening here in the Murph, you can have your allies help you. Now, that being said, the funny thing is, Adrana is not really on best terms with the Murph. The Murph is kind of looked at like it wouldn't even call it a successor state off of Adrana, but it kind of is in some ways because of the whole Ravian situation that happens in like the 1200s, late 1200s, early 1300s. That whole situation with Ravian kind of shakes things up a bit, and these two nations aren't exactly buddy-buddy. And same with Albadan. So there was a war between Adrana and Albadan, but this was a long time ago. Very long ago. In fact, the year would have been something like, I don't even remember what I said. It would have been in the late 400s. So, you know, 600 plus years ago. I don't know the math, from 1600 to the year 400. So that was a long time ago. And we do know that there was an expedition to newly acquired lands in Adrana. And I think that that was some sort of trade thing. I think that Adrana and Albadan are back on good terms. Possibly. There's a possibility that they are. And they kind of have to be for things to work. I don't really think Adrana would want to have enemies all around them. The issue here is, you know, you have enemies to the north, then you'll have enemies of Tantorum. And Lyrians aren't necessarily an enemy, but they're Anaku, so it's kind of hard to like rely on that as an ally, per se. So I just think it would be stupid to enclose yourself around a bunch of enemies. So Adrana, being the way I would try to be, is like diplomatic and just say like, I'll just try to be friends with everybody. I'll even drop things like, if you stole from me, I'll pretend you didn't, like just to get this rolling. Now the thing about Adrana that they're trying to do, again, rolling with the same concept of like how you play the game, is acquire as much wealth as possible. In Adrana, infrastructure is huge. They use a lot of labor from the Hafel, actually, because the Hafel are known as the builders. Think of like the dwarves in Lord of the Rings. What they're kind of known for, that's very much the Hafel. So when they use this workforce, and then they use their slaves that they acquire from down here, where the nations here, like Ugari, then there's Nazia, but they're like kind of like Yugoslovakia. It's kind of one of those things. Then you have, I think, Kisia. Oh God, the Irian. No, I don't remember. But there's a few nations like that. They're kind of relying on the slave trades mostly from here. Because the one thing that they try to do in Adrana is they try to do, like, how do I word this? We try not to piss too many people off with how they're doing things. So if we have too many slaves that are like in country, it just gives a bad look. But if people already look at this other nation as lesser in other descriptions, or they just simply don't really care about it. Yeah, I had to do a lot of things on there, so I might have lost my train of thought. But trading with the slave trades throughout these nations, it just kind of works out in a way where Adrana doesn't necessarily have to explain themselves. I guess we'll put it that way. So Adrana, we do know that there are trades going on through the Murf. Now the Murf is, like I was saying, kind of like a successor state in some way, but it's not. It's more like a exiles, if you will. So the Adenian exiles, lost my watch, she did that, are the ones that kind of control the Murf, if you will. So if you look at the past, you think of the revolt of Freyden and all that. If you look at anything else in the histories of Adrana, yes, the Murphos is kind of like the outcasts. They technically would owe their allegiance to Adrana, but there's been a rebellion of late, one that Freyden himself is handling. Now, there's a whole backstory of what's really, really going on out there, but as like a layperson or anyone that's just living, just a normal civilian or whatever, that's about all you'd know. You just know the Murph people are technically under the banner, if you know. Now, the Feroso is one of the newest nations in Vas, and they themselves actually are from lands kind of, it would be down here, called Islandi and Dulandi. The Dulandi and the Islandi are a group of islander people that have migrated up here and claim land there. It's kind of a whole situation with Tantorum. I guess to kind of wrap up Adrana a bit, I mean, we can go into details later because this is like shit I'm making up or I don't really know. So, to try to wrap up Adrana, I always want to say we, because it's my country, but they're trying to trade with everybody possibly. We have things going on with Albadan through the Green Wall. If they've purchased land, there must be, something's going on. They're trading with Hafel, they're trading with technically the Murph, they're trading with the Feroso in Lyria, and like I said, the nations here, they're probably trading with, well, more than probably, like over here in Dubois, we'll be trading. The southern nations, it's really hard to say because now Adrana has always been like whatever with Tantorum. Like Tantorum just fucking for the longest time despised Adrana. They couldn't stand them in the slightest. Adrana's like whatever about it. They feel safe enough. They have the mountains in the way. They have the Murphos. And a tight alliance with the Hafel is very helpful. The Murphos, they don't have a tight alliance, but the Murphos is a fucking crazy place. So there's no way, unless there's some sort of naval passage, that Tantorum would use. But the resources that they would just squander because of their constant conflict with Lyria, and possibly over here in Adrana. So they would be feeling the force of, if you come up here and try to attack Adrana, these nations here won't be okay with that. Adrana's making them a lot of money. So Tantorum's kind of in a bind there. I would say over time, after the 808 Years of War, which ended in like, I don't remember, 14 something or 12 something. I don't know. It ended in around, like 1480s. It's kind of when they just said, fuck it. Adrana's just going to be there. You know, it was a whole kind of jihad thing, but you can only stop the Muslims for so long, essentially, is kind of the idea that I have with Adrana and Tantorum. Now, Adrana set themselves up in a very good situation here. Now, the inner politics of Adrana are a bit fucky within themselves, and there are things that are going to happen, but we're not going to totally focus on that. We're looking purely more at the economics of the entire world. So Adrana, I feel kind of okay with them. The other major nation of mankind would be Tantorum. So Tantorum themselves, I mean, I don't know how to word it, but like, yeah, it would be something like that. And there's like the sea or some shit. Yeah, yippee-oy. Tantorum is kind of the opposite in some ways at times. Tantorum is, I don't know how much trade they do when it comes to all these other nations. I know that they have the, was it the Siom or the Saracens that are kind of within the commonwealth of mankind. Technically, because here's the mountain ranges, Koran's here. And then Dubois. Technically, that they are supposed to be allied with, okay, I don't know what I was talking about, I've forgotten. But Tantorum does have Saracens aid when it comes to it. I don't remember where Razium's, they're like somewhere in here. And then I thought there was another person, but I've totally forgotten. And these aren't my nations, so I'm not going to fuck with them. But Tantorum doesn't really have a lot going on when it comes to that. I know that there was some minor things going on in Nura. It's in Nura, that's the name of it. Was it Minor? Yeah, Nura Minor. Tantorum was involving themselves in situations there. But they're a nation on the verge of utter collapse if they do not watch it, because the way everything's set up here, so they've conflicted themselves by putting weird political situation in a Nura Minor. For what reason they're doing that, I don't really know exactly. But a Nura Minor is kind of a state, I wouldn't say being funded by, but definitely encouraged by Tantorum, which goes against more of the other nations here, which Adrana kind of agrees with. A Nura Major, for instance, the northernmost part of Nura kind of broke apart, Civil War thing. Adrana and Tantorum got involved, and you think of like proxy wars and shit. That's kind of what's being fought down there. Now Tantorum has this situation. The Ferosamire they're trying to push in on. For the longest time, they kind of put up with the Ferosamire. It wasn't outright conflict, and it wasn't anything dark. Check on the time. Okay. But in time, they're beginning to push in on them. Because we do know from the story, Aya mentioned something about a Dukan forcing her father out of his country and then eventually killing him to take over. Now, for what reason, it's unknown. We don't know. We do know that Van Inster is the head chancellor, and he has different. He has connections that are. How do I word this? No one really knows his true connections, but it's kind of a sinister thing. So I think a vice president, or not vice president, a vice something or other was killed. I don't remember. There's a whole story. They're in constant conflict with Lyria. They've made horrible enemies with Lyria, and they're quite okay with that. I would say they probably get along with Hafel. A long time ago, they tried to invade into Hafel, but failed. So Tantorum's kind of been sequestered to friendship, if you will. They probably could pay them handsomely for jobs and works done. The issue is Tantorum can only really trade with Sarceans, to which the Sarceans are kind of their proxy as well, because they can do trade with the southern nations. I imagine Tantorum's quite okay with the merchant princes in the south, so they can get some supplies from Sarceans and the merchant princes, to which the merchant princes are much like an Adrana nation. They trade with everybody. So I would say only through that is how they are still considered a nation. It's kind of sad that Tantorum has to be this place that's like kind of nobody likes, but making the book, it's like they become the enemy of everyone. So, I mean, it's not really on purpose, but oh, I have pain. Ow. And I would say that they probably are they trade with Dubois, you know. Tantorum's doing quite okay. I mean, they're having negative effects with Lyria. They're with Hafel. The Feroso, I mean, Tantorum's kind of got that Russia vibe to him, where it seems like it's the world against Russia and the Russia against the world kind of thing. Who knows what's really going on, but that's the way it'll always be painted. I kind of see that with Tantorum. And I don't think that they're necessarily got anything wrong with Quran. I mean, there's definitely things in the past of how Quran became a nation that would set Tantorum off, but the thing about Tantorum now is they're trying to sever the ties of their old religions. And they've been trying to do that for quite a while. You think of the 300s is when Quran was, well, I mean, Tanais of Tantorum's children. Markethos was in Tantorum, and then there's Senethos, Rhodesia or whoever, and Siomus. Now they kind of broke away from Tantorum, and eventually Tantorum sent people, kind of like an inquisition, to quell these nations and get them under the fold. Now, just about everything that happened in the South negatively was because of a religious kind of mentality, or it was because of fundamental belief systems. Adrana now, under the rule of Andensteer, and it's been kind of trending this way, has been trying to get away from all of that bullshit. Like, well, you know, like, we're supposed to be mad at you because the fucking figurehead of our nation you betrayed, your people did long ago. Like, they're trying to just step away from all that stuff and move into the future under Van and Steer. So they're basically bringing the fervor of the people down. So Tantorum is kind of on the coming ups. They are they're looked at okay in the world map. You know, they're not the crazy Tantorum in the 1000s and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, they're not this crazy berserker nation or extremists. It's the very, what is that called? An expansionism. Like, they kind of got over that. Tantorum settled in its borders. Adrana used that for quite a while, the way that Tantorum is, but eventually Tantorum themselves have chilled out a bit. So their diplomat and their economy is starting to grow, and it has been growing for the past about 40-something years is when it's really happening, because this nation almost could have crumbled. going the route they've been going for as long as they've been going. They still make mistakes. They're still doing weird things. Like, why would you invade the Farosamire and all that? And I'm sure there's legitimate reasons, but like that doesn't look well. Everyone's gonna be like, oh great, he's warmongering again, but who knows? The Council of Nations might eventually connoiter about something like that, and maybe they would have a valid point to everything going on. We do know that there's kind of a changing of guard in Tantorum. With the idea of like people like Gearlore and all the sympathizers of the true Tantoric nation. Van Insteer's cleaning house a bit. So Tantorum's under a regime change, and Vathia kind of exiled to the mountains, essentially exiled. Tantorum's shaking things up. They're doing new things. They're no longer trying to be at the will of all the bullshit that they used to be. Like what Tantorum was known for. Tantorum is known to be this expansionist people, this hardened fucking uber religious people. Now they're kind of against religion in a sense. So these, the religion in the book, that's known at least. They're changing. So Tantorum themselves is kind of on the uptick. Weirdly enough, under Van Insteer. Like, even though he's looked at as a really bad guy, I'd say that he's kind of definitely shaking up the nation a bit. And their public image, if you will. Okay. Adrana check, Tantorum check. So, the nations of Farosamire, Lyria, and Albadan, and Hafel. So the Fel find themselves in the middle of it all, literally, quite literally. The Fel are the people of the mountains. They're the ones who inhabit the Gaiavala Mountains. They're the only ones who really can inhabit the Gaiavala Mountains. It is not a place for the lighthearted. It is not a place for people that are... It's for hardy-ass people. The Hafel, being what they consider the builders, are, like, again, how we can relate it as like dwarves. They usually stick to themselves. They kind of... They got their own thing going on. The food provided to this nation not only is what they could naturally get themselves in the mountains, like the lower portions of the mountains, in the deep valleys or wherever they can actually do some agriculture. Yes, it is possible to do agriculture in those deep valleys, but they don't only sustain themselves that way. They have a couple things going on for them. One, the major thing is resources. They can provide resources to anyone. So that makes everybody here from Lyria, Adrana, possibly the Merfolk event, a little bit of Albadan, Tantorum, Barosso. They can provide all of them resources like ores, metals, stuff like that. They can even shape the metals and all that. Like they're builders, man. They know what they're doing. They can provide hardened resources like that of stone, metal, and whatever else weird element that I made up. That makes them a hot commodity. That makes people want to come to them. So they don't necessarily need to outstretch themselves. They have enough land for themselves in the mountains. They have magic, beautiful cities that they've established upon these mountainsides, on the mountain peaks at times, or down the valleys. They have figured out how to shape and harden and use these metals to their advantage, and they have like these machines that they use for transportation. They have ways to get across each other from peak to peak, let's say, or mountainside to mountainside through the valley. There's machines that they use to get across. The Hafel are doing quite well for themselves, and everyone's okay with them. They've never really done anything. There's been nothing that they've ever done in the history of the Hafel that I can remember that made other nations say, eesh, we don't want to fuck with them. They're pretty chill with each other, they're pretty okay. They find themselves to be very important to people. Now, there might be a point of someone wanting to enslave them when they become an expansionistic society and incorporate them into the society, but leaving them kind of to their own devices, much like the Persians would do, the ancient Persians. Other than that, the Hafel they're fine. They provide a lot of resources, they do a lot of stuff like that. One thing I was working on is understanding that and the relationship they may have with Adrana. And so I did a little thing. The Hafel would use their skill with craftsmanship as a way to acquire trade and food. So that's one way they acquire food. Besides their natural agriculture, they can trade for food and other resources. They would have made deals with the Drana to keep their mountains safe. Trade with their craftsmen and ores. So yeah, they trade their craftsmanship, like their actual laborers. We can come over to Adrana. We can build things for you. We can, like, it's just like architects and stuff like that, which Adrana could provide just alone. Food from outside nations, from everywhere else, whatever the Hafel would want, Adrana could get them. Now, Adrana would be the highest bidder. I'd imagine the Hafel trade with everybody, but Adrana's got to be up there in the list. Well, they've been trading with Adrana since like the 400s. So they've been got a thing going on. Adrana can get anything that they need. So Adrana's kind of, because of this richer nation, because they have this amassed wealth, they can step above everybody else and acquire things in order to have a relationship be something that is economic as well as political. As for a defense, Adrana would have the warrior even, to which Hafel would see their skill. As for the Hafel, they would have mastery of machine, like being that allowed travel to the mountain pass, like I said. Each has something that could help defend. So there's not really a whole lot needing defense, really. There's not like marauding orcs, like in Lord of the Rings, or like clans, or whatever they were, like before Sauron really kind of gathered them up. But there's not a lot of anything crazy like that going on. So it's more, if needed, Adrana can provide defenses, which explore the idea, this is for me, Hafel provide weaponry and Adrana could provide their magical weaponry. High-made smiths. The Hafel could make items and Adrana could enchant them. And so Adrana would want to trade with them. So it's like, the Hafel are more than capable of providing their own smithies and their own, you know, they can make their own weapons and stuff like that. But Adrana is the only nation that has the understanding of enchanted weaponry. Something that sets them apart. Tantorm is completely germs, something in Guns and Steel or whatever, I think Jacob described it. Tantorm is very Brotherhood of Steel. They're very, I don't know. I don't really know any other like fantasy shit. I would compare them to those people in Warhammer, but I don't even remember what they're called. The big armored guys and shit, like that's Tantorm. Tantorm is very guns, steel, and just no magic whatsoever. Just taken out of existence. Adrana has embraced it. Being that they're the children of the Forgotten King, Adrana themselves has found ways to enchant weaponry. So you'll see crazy weapons in Adrana, and you see a little bit in the book. The first book, when it comes to like the place of Olerin. I don't remember it used to be called Checkpoint Olerin, the chapter, but I don't know if it's called that anymore. But you'll see the weapons in that point, and there's other weird weapon called the Electric Stop, and just like this crazy shit. Adrana can provide stuff like that, to which the Hafel would find useful for their own reasons, and I don't know exactly what it is yet, but we'll figure it out. So to kind of wrap it up, Hafel themselves doing pretty good. They've got their own thing going on. They're trading with just about everybody, just like Adrana, but Adrana's really setting them over the edge. They're a useful nation, and no one will ever want to trample on them because no one can claim this land. It's nearly impossible, and the Hafel know that. So, with Tantorm, Adrana, and the Hafel out of the way, the Ferocimire are the newest ones on the actual stage. Being that they get a lot of their aid from the motherland of the Eastlandi and the Woolandi, they find themselves in a bit of a fucky spot. You're between the Murphos and Tantorum. The Murphos is not outright against these people. The people of the Murph they have no problems with the Ferocimire whatsoever. They have their problems with the northern folk. The Ferocimar don't need to really worry about that. That's just geographically. That's geographically just a fucked up spot to be. Just right against a massive desert like that. A lot of the winds that blow can kind of taint this northwesternish land of theirs. The real problem mostly is Tantorum. The Ferocimar and Tantorum aren't exactly eye to eye, and as we already know, there's kind of a passive conflict going on there for whatever reason. So the Ferocimar, we do know they trade with the merchant princes, and they're a very wealthy people in the south. Not as wealthy as like Adrana, but pretty damn good. And because of that, they probably trade with, the other 4 nations in Elandria. They don't really have a true ally. So when Tantorum, if Tantorum really wanted her to say, fuck it, let's just invade them for some reason, the Ferocimar could call on the East Landing the Woolandi. That would take a long time for those ships to come up. But now we're talking about just an all-out conflict of involving nations that would be down here. And the merchant princes wouldn't really get into it. Saracens on my side of Tantorum, they're kind of like their little puppet state, if you will. And they're on this side, they're kind of flanked. I would say they're almost strong. The Ferocimar are not doing okay. They're not even really counted as a nation that's going to last. Aya Kurdina, I think is the last name, I don't remember. She's got definitely a lot of work ahead of her, politically. We're going to kind of walk away from Feroso because I have no clue. I do know that they are, they're like, let me get the thing. Because I know that the Fel de Bois, Islandi. Oh, they're called the Woolandi now. Sorry, the Woolandi is the actual place. Woolandia. I changed the name again, because why not? The Leptis Guild. Oh my god. Trading in the Murphos. The first successful trading venture through the Murph was in the year 1360. When the Murph campaigns were being conducted between the Murph and the Adrana. Now, the real cause of this conflict, though it will not be described by scholars as such, is the Athenian trying to unravel the path through the Murphos in order to land trade to be conducted. This, however, would be harder than ever imagined. After many raids on their convoys and many lives lost to wandering, it was the Athenians who created the passer traders. They took the understanding of the Saik and exploited it to their advantage for the promise of coins. The process would be involved very Saik, to which guerrilla warfare was conducted on the Athenian passes and their caravans. What does this have anything to do with that? Dubois. Okay, so there's a relationship between the I guess it's called Woolandi now, Wuhlandi. The Woolandi are trading with people of Dubois, so they're able to trade not only with some of these nations and the merchant princes, but through the Illyrian Strait with the people of Dubois. People of Dubois are trading with Lyria. Again, they found themselves connected into the hub. They plugged in. Now, if I'm not mistaken, oh yeah, the land deed. It's a whole thing. That's why Tantorum's invading. Technically, it's on a land deed, this Woolandi, and they're taking it back. That's how they're legally doing this. You know how the Trade Federation in Star Wars is like, well, like how they're technically, we didn't do anything wrong. That's what Tantorum's pulling with the Woolandi. It's like, well, we signed an agreement. We have the agreement here, and they signed it, leasing this land from us, and guess what? The time's up. We want it back. That's kind of what they're playing at. And it's like, well, it's all here legally, so we're not doing anything wrong. That whole bullshit thing. I just remember them being kind of like trader people, naturally trader. Yeah, wealthy people of the land. They are one of the skier. Yeah, 1470 is when they really settled. So it wasn't really that long ago that they'd been there. They're not known for their monarchical reigns. They're like a corporate guild. Okay, that's what it was. So the Islandi, sorry, we can't call them that. The Woolandi are kind of corporate. Now, they may be losing this corporate battle when it comes to the whole land trade thing, but the Woolandi will overcome it in some way, shape, or form. It's interesting to imagine them this way. It's a very new nation that I made up. I was like watching someone play Cyberpunk a lot, and I was like, fuck, like, Woolandi, I don't know, like weird corporate people and like weird espionage shit and corporate wars instead of actual conflicts and trading and all that. We'll have to come back to the Woolandi. Again, I love how I always like change names, and I do it so much that even I forget. They're not called that anymore, dude. Like, okay. The major nation really left. Oh, there's Albadan, but the major nation left to talk about is Lyria. Lyria. One of the Anaku nations, one of the only Anaku nations that are on Voss. There are Anaku nations throughout, whatever the fuck this place is called, Atria, which is this land and that land. But Lyria is one of the only ones here. Now the Lyrians have their own little history. Kicked out from their forest of Trinity by Tantorm, what would become Tantorm, forced to wander for over 100 years nomadically. Then in about the year 103, what they call the slaughter of something, I don't have the name for it yet, Tantorm would just say the Sea People invasion. They clash with Tantorm. Then for another, from year 103 to year 110, the Trail of Tears happens. Till they finally settle upon their land of shit. It's right here. What the fuck's the name of that place? Dude, it's just the mountains up there near the peak, where Akervary is. I don't remember that. The something Heights or something. Ovaaka Heights. They settled up there. They found an ancient city, long forgotten. One of the Titans, actually. One of the Titans is like cities that they lived in and dwelled. Lyrians dug underground. And they created vast, interconnected, underground mountain cities. Kind of dwarven like themselves. There's a natural kind of thing Havel and Lyria share in this digging underground, digging for riches and very dwarvenish mentality. They have nothing to do with each other. When it comes, like the Havel are their own race of people. Lyrians are Anaku. They're not like, well, they're like dwarven-like. Like they don't even look like dwarves. Basically, that kind of said, fuck the fantasy, and I'm just gonna like just make things like that. Now, after the year 200, the Doreen dynasty happened, and then going forward, Lyria slowly became what they are known for now. Let me get I could make a professional video where like there's like parts where I'm like monologuing and I'm showing pictures, but I don't have nearly enough pictures drawn, hand drawn, to like show while I'm talking about something. I could take the picture of the map and then like, you know, animate it and all that, but that's a lot. I'm not that person. Anyway, they would kind of establish these big cities, and they would establish guilds. Now these guilds would be vying for power over one another. Then there's the miners' guilds. So again, much like the Havel, Lyria, natural resources will have an abundance. They also have enough agriculture. They have enough like farmable land that they can sustain themselves. Another commodity. So trading back and forth with Hafel, I think is their first real major trade people. Their first major trade. And obviously, naturally, they would be trading with Sapernia, or as the nation's called, fucking Etrovia. Now, Illyria has a natural alliance with Etrovia, and they kind of create almost like a confederacy, a very loose one, where we're not talking about Etrovia or the Shattered Isles or Dubois, and you know what I mean. We're only talking about Voss right now. We'll talk about them tomorrow. But they're trading with Etrovia. They're trading with the Shattered Isles, which I forgot to mention exists, and everyone else is trading with them. Shattered Isles, very naval kind of people, seamen and all that shit. So they naturally are boat people. Let's just say it like that. So if you have the natural builders in Hafel, well, you have the natural boat people there. So they're a great ally to have. That Adrana has, by the way. But Lyria, trading with the Shattered Isles, trading with Etrovia. They trade a bit with Albadan. They trade with Dubois. The Valens, they try to have deals with. They even kind of go down here too. Naturally against Tantorum, so you don't see a lot of trading happening with Tantorum, the Sarceans, or any of the people that are in cahoots with them. They're more than happy to trade with Woodlandi, any one of these nations here, Adrana, the Murph. Lyria puts her hands as much places as they possibly can because Lyria is a nation that's trying to overcome the old ways. Now there's an inner conflict happening in Lyria. The old ways and the new ways, I guess you could say. The old ways is to hate mankind, to blame them for everything, and to help destroy them in some way, shape, or form, whatever is humanly possible, whatever is Anaku possible, however you say that. The other side, with their new king, I don't remember his name, Xanathos, is trying to change that fact. He's like, look what we can do. We can exist all together here. We can all be okay together. He's doing that. There's inner conflict. This nation's on the verge of some fuckery. There's religious fundamentals called the Ebby, who are in cahoots with the Serpentine Order. The Serpentine Order will be funded by the Ebby through the court systems, and the Ebby will slowly be trying to taint the minds of all of the court people, the people of the lords of the fucking fiefdoms, or whatever the hell they want to call it. That's an inner thing. So, just to understand, Lyria is trying to be a good nation, but it cannot be. It will not work. There's too much inner conflict happening. That's a whole thing. Tantorum could capitalize on the situation here. Maybe finally get rid of Lyria, and Mao Tantorum has this much land. Wow, we have almost half the continent, or the island. Time to go after these guys. And Tantorum is playing one of those games where they're quietly, they're like, well, no one's allowing us to invade anymore, so let's invade legally. Like, well, no one's here, or this contract says we can have it. They're finding new ways to invade. If they were to get these two, man, they'd have most of the land. They'd probably be like, oh, no, successor. They'd probably say something like, you puppet states, you can kind of keep your own shit. Lyria, I'm going to kind of move on from, because Albadan is interesting. It's one of the most interesting ones. For the longest time, they've had a closed border after the conflicts with Adrana. After the Green Wall was established, they kind of just said, fuck it. We've got all this land here. It's like Russia, We've got enough shit. We have all the land, we have enough resources, we have enough people. We can take care of ourselves. We don't need anybody. And it's very true. But something was happening within Albadan, and it's a story that I haven't really established because I probably thought of it a few months ago, where there's a shift of that. Much like in Lyria, much like in Tantorum. We're shifting ideas. We're being new. We're not going to do these things. These are two totally different outcomes. These guys are overcoming their old bullshit, at least pretending to. Lyrians are kind of wanting to go back to it. Albadan themselves are probably the most successful ones, where they're saying, we want to have a fresh start. We don't need closed borders. I would picture it like, imagine if the Celts were never invaded by Rome, but then the Celts just said, like, we're going to just kind of like hang on and only fuck about ourselves. That's Albadan. Sure, there are clan wars going on within there. Sure, there are this and that and crazy things happening. That's beyond the imagination, because of the Wild North is a fucking crazy place. But Albadan seeks to come out of its shell. And they begin with an old blood conflict, an old blood feud with the Drana, and cease that, and going for, and that happened in like, fuck, I don't remember when they did that, because it was like the 400s. I probably would imagine relatively recently, because Judan was exploring up in that region with Cyprus in 16 something, 1620s, 1630s, I don't remember, but really recent. Albadan's coming out of its shell. They want to play the big stage. There's probably many reasons for it. You know, they might be low on resources. They might be, I don't know, some sort of inner conflicts. It's really hard to say. But Albadan's a new player in the whole thing, a Voss. Now, I'm going to kind of go away from that. Just, you know, you can tell how much I know about it by how little I talk about them. Valons are the most interesting people. These will be the last one they talk about. We didn't really talk about the Murph, I don't think. I really don't remember. But they're not really a nation, honestly. They're kind of a nation, I guess. But the Valon people, the Valandi, the most stepped on people literally in history, constantly in the middle of the bullshit between Lyria and Tantorm. Other than that, they're fucking fine. You know what I mean? Like, and there's a lot of famous Valander people in the world of the book, but the Valand is just, I don't think they ever got a chance to. It's like Afghanistan, really great, proud nation, like the fucking empires that were there in the general area, just the Middle East in general, really. And they're just like, now it's just like, it's hard to muster them. It's hard to get them just to go and stand up on their own 2 feet. And they're just, I don't fucking care. I'm a farmer, or I'm just a herder, or, you know, whatever. I kind of really think of the Valons like that. Like in Iraq, like in Afghanistan, like, you know, I'm not saying that they're weak nations by any means. I'm saying, like, they've been stepped on so much in history. Just fucking the entirety of history, that like it's really shaped their nation into, like, I wouldn't say submissive, but they never got a chance to really be anything. You could go there and it's like a third world country in places, a lot of places, most places. The Valanders are much like that. They're just, they never really got a shot. And I think that helps with what goes on into the actual story, which we cannot talk about yet. But the Valanders are the least likely to do anything. But they do have a magical thing. Their magical ability of the Myers. And I wouldn't call it exactly terraforming, but something very close. They have skills. Very, very important skills. One kind of skills that nations look at and want to use. They've kept themselves relevant merely by accident, merely just by being who they really are, not even on purpose. You will never see a Valand taken. You will never see it cease to be, and it's part of Tantorm, or it's part of Lyria. Nobody can settle those lands. I mean, there are 2 campaigns fought between Lyria and Tantorm there, and the outcome was a stalemate at the very best of times. But I think that's all I can really stream of consciousness when it comes to the economics of Voss. It's a very humble beginning of it, and we'll get into it. This is more like an overview, to which I'll go into it in more detail. Probably more of me talking to the microphone and having pictures and stuff like that. That's that. And then we'll move on to the next thing. And that will be part 2, I guess. Friend or bitch or whoever.